We are building the Metro Map project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.byte.in. Having understood the methods available with the canvas widget, it's now time for us to start putting together the map itself. Now remember, the whole idea is that we have two lines which are crisscrossing each other at a particular station called YByte. These two lines are called the scratch line and the Python line for us. Scratch line is orange in color and Python line is blue in color. Now this is also aligned with the convention most of the places that have, where lines are associated with a certain color. Notice, however, that even though we have only two lines with a single interchange, there are many possibilities. For example, just draw the lines like this, or we could draw the lines, let's say, in an inclined fashion, or we could kind of draw a line, let's say, one line a little bit broken and other one straight. In fact, there are many more configurations. As we saw previously in real world, many times the lines are displayed so that they kind of align with how the city looks like. But we are going to just choose a simple approach where we'll have one line horizontal and one line vertical. The code we will write, of course, will be flexible enough to create any of these. But the big point here is that, no matter what approach we choose, we will need to plan this carefully so that we know where, our stations are going to appear, how the labels are going to appear, and the entire space is used meaningfully and clearly. And this is an important part of this because the design of the project has to be clear to the user. But assuming that we choose the approach that we showed on the left side, what we are really going to do is that we are going to draw stations using create oval. We are going to draw these lines using, let's say, create line. And once we know the X and Y coordinates of these, we can plan this whole thing out and also put the labels using create text. Now, of course, you could have used, instead of circles, you could have used a square or probably a combination of the two. That's also perfectly fine. Like I said, important, however, that we plan this thing out. And in our case, what we are going to do is that we are going to put our two lines like this. Remember, X and Y starts on 0, 0 at the left corner. So I'm going to say, let me start my sprite line. Let me start my scratch line at, let's say, 50 to 100. Thereafter, put every station at a distance of 70. So I'm going to just, put one line starting from here. And, we'll write code to do this. Like I said, we'll use these methods that we have seen before previously. And later on, we'll come back and add the second line. In fact, I'll build the first line first because it becomes more clear that way. And thereafter, we'll in fact complete the entire project before we come back to build the Python line because that flow becomes more logical. We understand better what's going on. Now with this done, let's get back to our code. I'm going to define a list of all the stations that I have on the scratch line. So let's call it, let's say, STN SL for scratch line. Now again, you can be quite creative here, but I'm using stations like, say, sprite land, so I have to be careful here, say go and glide. Let's try, let's say, go and glide. Let's say costumes, say broadcast, say Y byte, say cloning, and finally, let's say my blocks. Now, like I said, you need not have exactly the stations. You can have different names, different number of stations, but of course, you'll have to plan this whole thing accordingly. Now I'm going to, previously I told you I'm going to start putting my scratch station at X of 50, Y of 200. So I just defined a couple of variables here. X of S is say 50, Y of Y underscore S is say 200. I'm going to use these later on. And I'm going to maintain a station distance of, let's say, 70. Now in my case, the distance between stations will be constant, but of course you can, change this, between different stations, you can have a different distance. All of that is seen as an enhancement. So I just go and say also, let's say radius of every station, because I'm going to use the oval to generate it, of, let's say, 6. Of course, this has all been done based on the design that we want. So I go and say, okay, look, let me run a loop, a for loop, say for STN in, say STN, say STN SL, basically running a for loop. This variable STN is going to take values, sprite land, go and glide, costumes, and so on and so forth, because I'm just iterating over this list. So I say, okay, once you, move over these, can you please create for me a line? Create, let's say, line. Now remember, create line goes a line from x1 y1 to x2 y2. So I'm going to say create me a line from xs ys to, let's say, xs plus dstn, and to say ys. Now notice the reason I'm doing it this way is because my scratch line is horizontal, which means the y coordinate doesn't change, it stays at 200. My x coordinate changes every time by, let's say, 70 points in this case, because distance is 70. Now if you wanted a different distance between every station, you can convert this also to a list, and you can accordingly adjust this number here. I'm going to also create an oval for every station, because that's what does the job for me. So I just go and say c dot create oval. And now this I have to be a little bit careful. I'm just going to say create an oval between, let's say, xs minus rstn, and we'll talk about this in a moment. Say to y underscore s minus rstn, xs say plus rstn, and say ys plus rstn. Now, why does that work? Well, that just goes back to the definition of create oval. Remember, I'm supposed to specify this corner and this corner. Now, my center point is basically x, s, y, s. Radius of the circle is r station, which means that the coordinates of this are x minus r station, y minus r station. Coordinates of this are x plus r station, y plus r station. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Now notice that in this code, stn is taking values from this list, right, land, go and glide, and so on and so forth. I want every station to appear at a distance of d station from the previous one, which means that I'm going to have to change my xs to, let's say, xs plus dstn. Now really, this is no different from, for example, what we have done previously when we arranged pixels in the pixel art, or for example, when we did long back the brick breaker game, we arranged one row of bricks. It is really, really very similar. Try to see that similarity, and that will help you. But if I do this, if I run this code, notice that I get, my 7 stations, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I'm getting this one extra piece of line over here. Now, why does this line appear? Well, that's because I'm iterating over this, this list. Every time, for every item, I'm creating a line and also an oval. But then really, I do not need the line for the very last station, which means that I can modify this code to say, okay, look, if let's say stn is not equal to stn sl, say -1. So if it's, for the last station, I don't want to draw a line, but before that, I'll keep drawing these lines. So let me just align this better. And now I expect this to be correct. Notice I get exactly the way I wanted it to be. Of course, I'll add some colors and labels as we move forward. But notice now there's no extra line coming up. That's because I'm doing the create line only for the first 6 stations, not for the 7th station. And that's being done from this piece of code. Remember, list indexing this with a negative number means the last item. Also, this exclamation equal to means not equal to. So basically, for the first 6 stations, I draw a line. Otherwise, I do not. Now I'm going to, create these, I'm going to give some color and stuff for this line. So I just say fill, for example, is equal to, say, dark orange. And for the oval as well, I'm going to say fill equals to, say, dark orange. Now you can use any color, but I'm using dark orange for my scratch line. So I just call, let's say, fill for both of these. Also, I will, create a label here. Remember, label can be created by using c dot, say, create text. Now I want in my this line, I want the label to appear slightly below the station. So I just say, okay, generate for me a label at xs ys plus 30. Now remember, y is being counted from top. So if I keep going down, I want to go a little bit further down. So say plus 30. So that takes it slightly down. At that point, I want to put a label which is text, is stn, because remember, stn is iterating over this list, which means stn is already taking these values as the list is moving, rather as the for loop is moving. And for this, I'll just say fill equals to, let's say, again, I put, say, dark orange, and let's say font equals to, let's say, again, you can be flexible here. So I say Helvetica, say 6 bold. Now, when I do this, I expect my line to be orange in color with those labels, available to me, when I run this code, I get exactly what I was looking for. My first line has been created. Now all of this, is according to the code over here. So I'm getting, let's say, stations in circles, lines in between them, and I'm getting labels as they are displayed here. Now, of course, you can play with this. You can make the line wider, thicker. Like I said, you can have the line laid out completely differently by just playing around with this code. But that is all enhancements. We are going to look at this a little bit later. Like I said, there are clear similarities, for example, to the pixel art, to say the brick breaker, and so on and so forth. Think of those similarities in your mind as you do this, and you will find that this is very, very logical. We will build on this in the coming videos, but if you find that this way of learning is fun, look at our website www.ybyte.in, because we learn Python programming through such fun activities. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.